Hello, I'm Carrie Bishop. I am the Project Rights Officer for Tate's Archives and Access Project. Basically what that means is anything to do with the rights associated with those 52,000 pieces, you come to me. Before we start, there are a couple of things I want to say. One, this presentation and hopefully some useful notes will be available next week. So if you want to scribble away, be my guest. But if not, just sit back and relax, because there'll be something probably more grammatically correct, sort of like coming down the line. The second thing I want to say is, from the off, copyright's often seen as a hurdle for archive digitisation projects. And so what this presentation is about is to offer some practical guidance about how to approach clearances when you're looking at mass digitisation projects and archival works of this type. And the emphasis is going to be that, look, legal knowledge is very much only part of what I do. So what my job involves is just like a lot of practical shuffling around of things, and I hope that will kind of become clear, basically. So, first things first. Ooh, different dots. What we're looking at today, going to have a brief project overview, going to briefly look at some of the IP challenges for the project, and then I'm going to look at certain things in details, importance of copyright awareness for archivists and cataloguers, working with rights holders, managing complex rights, and the creative use of copyright exceptions. And then there was going to be questions at the end, but seeing as there's tea break afterwards, come and find me, and I'm also going to be around at lunchtime as well. So next, ooh. Right, so Archives and Access Project itself. Very briefly, we were very lucky. We got funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund. The project was running from 2013 to 2018. I started on this in October 2013, and I'm due to finish at the end of the summer this year. It's the largest digitisation project of its kind currently in the UK. We're making available over 52,000 pieces from Tate's archives. And there are lots of different strands to it. So although part of it, part that I deal with, is making that available online, doing all the clearances for it, we've also got a fantastic learning outreach program with throughout the nations and regions. There's also volunteer programs which have been developed as a result of it. There's also crowdsourcing for transcription tools, which is underway. So there's a lot of very different strands that are going on around it. So next up, IP challenges for the project. 52,000 pieces in total. Most of the work is in copyright, and most of it is copyright that doesn't belong to Tate, all right? So at least 80%, if not more, belongs to other people. There's a huge complexity of core uses, not just for Tate, but also in terms of the needs of the learning partners that we're working with and how they need to use that material. We're also introducing Creative Commons for this material as well, so that's a whole different licensing regime, which is unusual for Tate and for the sector as a whole, but also in terms of the rights holders. Some of them just never have no idea what I'm talking about when I talk about Creative Commons in the first instance. There's also, as you can imagine, like a huge volume and variety of rights holders that we're dealing with. I'm looking at excluding Orphan Works, over 1,000 different rights holders, so excluding any Orphan Works and all the due diligence involved in that, excluding anything that's copyright expired. There's also a huge variety of material, so it's sketchbooks, it's letters, it's postcards, it's audiovisual work, it's scrapbooks, flyers, you name it, it's probably in there. And also importantly, the rights holders themselves often not have any relationship with the art world itself. So they're not known to the gallery. So I also spend a lot of time researching, trying to track these people down. There's also the multi-layered nature of much of the content of this work. Postcards are the bane of my life. That's all I'm going to say. And projects evolve, which I think is probably going to be touched on by the other speakers as well. But you can't anticipate everything from the outset, so you need to be responsive to the material that's coming to you. And that's probably like a general rule that's going to apply across anything that you're doing, not just rights. So next one, okay, a bit of the nitty-gritty, I'll hopefully not canter through so quickly. Firstly, archivists and cataloguers need to be IP aware. So, and that they're often the first line defense, and just explain what I mean by that. basically, I do not have the time to physically look through 52,000 different objects in the archive or 52,000 images of those objects in the archive. It would be lovely, but I just can't do that. So what that means in the first instance is that I'm really reliant on the first draft to the cataloguing information that comes to me from the cataloguers about that piece and about those collections. So what comes is they'll do an export from CALM, which is the cataloguing program that they use, and in that information is a whole bunch of stuff that you would expect, a piece number, the unique piece number, descriptions, titles, dates, mediums, dimensions, all this kind of stuff. But what they also have is identification of what they think who they think the curator is for that work, and hopefully also some indication of if they think, this might be the copyright holder. I'm not going to hold them to that information, but it would be good to get an idea of, who they think it is. Even if they don't know who it is, it would be really useful to say, we think there's another copyright holder, we just have no idea who it is, because then at least I know to look for something, to say, okay, I need to pay attention to that particular piece or to this body of work, because it's a bit unclear. If you've got a stream of things which say these are the letters of Duncan Grant, and it just says creator Duncan Grant and copyright holder Duncan Grant, I'm going to go, okay, the copyright holder is probably going to be the literary estate of Duncan Grant. I'm not really going to pay it that much attention. If there's something that indicates, like in the description, this is the postcard, or there's a sketch in there or something like that, I know that I need to dig around a bit more in it. Okay, so I'm really reliant in the first instance on that information coming through. So it's really important that the cataloguers and archivists are aware of what, from a legal perspective, I'm going to be looking at as a copyright officer. So next slide. All right. So this is an example of how things can go a bit wonky. All right. Now, I feel like a bit of a snitch, because this is a rare example when I came across something and said, well, blimey, I really wasn't expecting that, okay? So basically, in the cataloguer's notes, this says it's a flyer for an exhibition from Kurt Svitter's archive for the Sydney Janus Gallery. The curator in the notes said Sydney Janus Gallery. The copyright holder said Sydney Janus Gallery. Now, the Sydney Janus Gallery may have indeed created this flyer, but as you can quite clearly see, that is not the only copyright holder that is at play here. You have Matisse, you have Picasso, you have Metzinger, Braque, Gries is, or Gris, he's copyright expired, but these are Dax artists, right? And they're very much in copyright. Now, I came across this because what I tend to do is when I'm looking at relatively small numbers of material, so less than 40 images, I'll tend to provide those as PDFs to the rights holder for a bunch of reasons, most of the time because it helps them make a decision about what they're kind of granting rights to. If I didn't do that, if I just went the catalogue, if I just relied on those cataloguing notes, there would be trouble, all right? So again, it's just a practical emphasis of please, even if you don't know who the copyright holders are, just say, we think there's something else going on here, because then I'll pay attention. But if you don't, sometimes purely by luck, I will discover that something else is going on. And if I don't discover that, then there may be issues down the line. Right, next thing, working with rights holders. I cannot overestimate enough the need to communicate clearly and work with rights holders if any of the projects like this are actually going to succeed, if I'm going to get their permission to release this work. And I just want to talk about why that's so important. It's probably really obvious, but just to explain it in terms of the work that I do. As you all know, archival material is kind of unique. It's very different from main collection works from material that's hanging up on a gallery wall. So not only do you have a huge range of material, postcards, all those kind of things, but you also have a huge diversity of rights holders. So, and these rights holders obviously oftentimes have nothing to do with the art world whatsoever. You know, they are friends. this is like from all sorts of places. So to give you an example, I've had to deal with cat sanctuary in Switzerland, which was my personal favourite, convents, nuclear power companies, Jamaican hospitals, the list goes on. And as you can imagine, these are not something people that Tate normally deals with, as far as I'm aware, unless there's a secret cat sanctuary division of Tate, which would be fun, but I haven't discovered it. So, and also bearing in mind that oftentimes, archive material comes into Tate's archive, as it probably does everywhere else, from a whole bunch of different sources. So the rights holders may have no idea that Tate actually holds this material in the first instance. I mean, so we've got Meninsky's notebook. He pulled out bits and bobs from whatever. So we have material from a psychoanalytic text, which Bernard Meninsky at some point ripped pages out of and stuck in his notebook during the 1950s at some point, all right? So they're going to have no idea, Mr. Estate of A.A. Roback, no idea that we hold that material, okay? Bearing in mind that we're often dealing with non-arts professionals as well, so these are families, friends, relations, these kind of things. They don't normally deal with licenses at all. So it's really important to convey clearly and consistently what you're asking them to sign off, what the project is about, all these kind of things. So one of the things I do is really important, and I advise it if you're dealing with any kind of volume, is to produce cheat sheets. So what I send out to each and every rights holder that I'm dealing with, I have a cheat sheet about the project. I have a cheat sheet about what Creative Commons is about. I have a cheat sheet showing this is how the information will appear online. And generally I also provide PDFs of the images as well so they can see what they're referring to. And this is really important because it provides clear, consistent information, ensuring parity across the information that I'm giving out to people, so everyone has the same information, nobody feels left out. And I also encourage rights holders to ask questions, because if they're unsure about anything, I want to make sure that they know what they're signing up to. That's really, really important. It's important for me and my reputation. It's important for the organisation's reputation. It's important for the project's reputation as a whole. So be a good communicator, provide clear and consistent information. It's really, really important. Number 3, keeping track of the challenges, as they say. Now, as I've said, I can't emphasise enough that the law is only one part of what I do. And I'm going to talk next about something that takes up a lot of my time, which is basically staring at spreadsheets. All right, this is very glamorous, but it's what I do a lot of the time. So, as you know, archive material is often multi-layered. So, postcard, you may have who writes on the back of the postcard. You've got maybe an artwork in that postcard. You've got the photographic rights of that artwork that's been taken. You're also dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of rights holders when you're looking at any kind of scale of mass digitisation. And the reality is that a lot of the gallery systems, such as TMS, which we use at Tate, are just not geared up for that. They were basically designed for main collection work. So you've got a few main collection works, you've got one rights holder, you've got one policy. So, but what I deal with is, for example, one piece can have, I think the most I've got is 9 different estates dealing with one piece. One of those estates has 3 different rights holders in that estate. So there's all these people just for one piece that I'm kind of keep track of. And TMS just isn't geared up for that. So because you've got multiple rights holders, because you have a huge volume of these different rights holders, because they're all at different stages of contact, of providing their information back, of giving their permissions, because I'm dealing with Tate licenses, I'm dealing with Creative Commons licenses, I'm dealing with data protection information that's coming back to me. I need to know whether that information is linked into TMS, whether it's released, all these different stages. I need to have something that will really clearly and really simply give them an idea of where the heck I'm at, because I need to know, and the people that I'm working with need to know as well. So, just briefly, this is an example of some of the information that I'm looking at. This is a sketchbook of Donald Rodney. He's drawn it. This is him drawing an extract from Picasso's Guernica. This is installation shot from Nigel Henderson's Parallel Life and Art exhibition. There are probably about 150 or so of these installation shots, and yes, it did take an awful long time to work out whether any of this was in copyright, who the rights holders were, whether I had to deal with it. It was a bit of a pain, to say the least. And this is an example from Julian Trevelyan's scrapbook. Again, there are several volumes of this, but you get the idea. You're kind of dealing, even with one piece, lots of different copyright holders going on. So first thing I do is I have an overview sheet, which basically tells me what the heck is going on. Now, I know this is a lot of information to take in, hence the reason why I'll be sending out the PowerPoint. But basically what this sheet tells me is who the main artist collection is, who the additional copyright holders are, what their life dates are, how many pieces I'm dealing with for each estate, for each rights holder in that situation, whether it's a collecting society or not, whether it's Dax or Bridgman, for example, whether I've contacted the estate, whether I've sent them the information they require, whether they've sent the information back, whether they've refused information at all, if it's an orphan work, if it's an await claim work, if it's being linked, what policy that associates with, all those kind of things. I use this sheet a lot because I need to know where I am when I'm just looking at just a sheet that effectively printed out like that. Really, really tiny text. And the next is, this is a detailed sheet which I work on based on the information that comes from the cataloguers. And again, this is more in detail at piece level information. Again, it talks about what policy I'm referring to, the main collection this comes from, the individual rights holders and what status they're at, the piece numbers, basic cataloguing information, whether I need to see that image, whether I need to supply that image, these kind of things. So again, you can look at a granular level about where you're at for each individual piece. And this is also very useful, for example, if for some reason you go, okay, that's all cleared, and you look online on a site and go, that's not appearing, why is that? So you need to know whether you've forgotten something or whether there's another issue involved. So that's that. So the final bit is the legal bit, which is talking about some creative use of copyright exceptions. So basically it's this. We spent a lot of time discussing licenses, managing rights, working with rights holders, all those kind of things. But there are situations when the rights holder is going to refuse for a bunch of reasons, basically, and or whether the rights, it's just, you're dealing with like Meninsky notebooks where it's 350 pages of extracts, okay, or bits of quotes, and if you're going to attempt to clear that, you would lose your mind, and it would just take forever. You're not going to do that. So what you want to think about now is how copyright exceptions can be your friends if you use them judiciously. So obviously there have been recent changes in the Copyright Act, dedicated terminals, yada, 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 all those things which you're probably aware of. There's also the EU Orphan Works Directive, which has now come into play. I'm not going to talk about that. That will take a long time. What I want to talk about are some of the copyright exceptions which I have actually used in this project and which you're probably familiar with at various levels. Crit and review, insubstantial use, and quotation, which is a new exception, but you should be familiar with it. So first things off, criticism and review. This is an example from Donald Rodney's sketchbook, okay? He obviously created it for his own private study. So Mickey Mouse being associated with cultural imperialism or cultural something, he says, probably isn't going to be an issue, but they probably are not going to approve the fact that they might be associated with napalm, the Vietnam War, and various other things, basically. Likewise, DC Comics are probably not going to be happy with that association. They're not going to grant permission to use this material, right? I, however, want to get this material out there. We've got a public remit. This is part of Donald Rodney's work. I want to get this out there because this is part of what he does. So how can we do this? Now, crit and review is really useful at this point. I know that when you probably encounter it most of the time, you think of it in terms of somebody has written an article about an artist, they've got an image of that work, and then they talk a bit about that work in commentary underneath, saying, look at the colours in that, isn't it beautiful? And all this kind of thing. Now, there's nothing in the Copyright Act, though, that says that criticism has to be external, okay? So you've got an image, if, as we have here, and there's some kind of criticism in there, well, the Copyright Act doesn't preclude that. Equally, there's a really useful case which came out in 1999, decision by the Court of Appeal, which is ProSieben Media and Carlton Television. Now, this is incredibly handy because what that held was that crit and review can apply to an idea. It doesn't have to be specific to a work, okay? So here you've got a situation where Donald Rodney has said, in his opinion, Mickey Mouse, Superman logo, these are all kind of ideas where he's kind of playing around with ideas of cultural imperialism and how that sort of has impacted on the work that he's developing, basically, talking about examples of US military actions, these kind of things. So you could argue, well, he's crit and reviewing here. There's sufficient to actually meet the exception requirements, okay? We then need to assess it in terms of risk. So we're releasing all this material non-commercially. We're not making a buck out of it. We're not releasing this material under Creative Commons. And if you look at this work and if you look at the body of Rodney's work, these are ideas that he's continually referring back to when working on. So we can say, okay, well, look, the risk is low. We think it meets the criteria under crit and review for this. And also, we're attributing it on a website in the manner that we're supposed to as required by law. We're saying who the rights holders are, etc. And then equally, we're assessing it in terms of fairness. Now, because this is a common recurring theme for Donald Rodney, I've looked at where Mickey Mouse, for example, occurs throughout the collection, and I'll say, well, okay, this number of occurrences, is this fair use? There are points when we say, well, it's 15 uses of Mickey Mouse. That's probably not fair. We can probably get away with 5. The other 10, let's redact in some way so that we know that we meet the fairness criteria and we're staying within the law. So that's one example of how crit and review can actually achieve the aims. And so think of exceptions creatively. The other one is quotation, insubstantial use. One of Meninsky's notebooks. Again, what you have here, I know this is all expired, but you have lots of little kind of 15, 10-word quotes, right? These are very short. If you honestly thought, even if you knew who they were, if you wanted to do due diligence on it, you would lose your life trying to work through all of this, right? These are insubstantial. They don't require copyright. Accept that, move on, deal with something that actually requires your time, okay? Don't fritter away. Look at what the work is. If you think it's insubstantial, and 10, 15 words, something like this, even if it was in copyright, is insubstantial. It doesn't have copyright. Don't worry about it. Use your time elsewhere. The final thing is the quotation exception, which just came in October last year. Again, this is Meninsky's notebooks. What you're looking at something is a more sort of longer extract. So it's an extract from work about Goya. It's 274 words. There's also another known extract, which is about 57 words. Now, we don't know what proportion of the original work this would constitute, but irrespective of that, we could probably say that this is not insubstantial. This is a quotation. Again, you've got hundreds and hundreds of pages of stuff like this. It would take you a lifetime to have to worry about the clearances for it if it was in copyright. Equally, even if it was an orphan work, due diligence takes a lot of time. I cannot emphasise that enough. It takes as much time, a lot of occasions, as actually clearing the rights anyway themselves, okay? You've got 52,000 pieces. You need to move on. If you use the quotation exception, you can basically speed up that entire process. Again, think of it in terms of what the exception requirements. It needs to be fair. You need to attribute it. You need to assess the risks involved. But if you think about all those things, well, this is non-commercial. It's less than 400 words, so it's probably going to fall under quotation. We're not releasing it under Creative Commons. We're going to attribute it. We can use a quotation exception to get this out on a website without having to spend a huge amount of time trying to actually clear this work. And again, we're just going to be achieving our aims for it. So I know that was a bit of a canter. I will be around at lunchtime and at this break to kind of talk to anyone. And equally, please come and find me at Tate, email me if you have any questions, need to know anything. But just a quick recap of what we've discussed. Legal knowledge is only a part of what I do for the job. So copyright, you need to have copyright awareness, but a lot of the time, think about how you're actually going to manage the copyright. That's a lot of what I do. Archivists and legal rely on each other, so please provide IP training for your archivists and cataloguers before they start their work. That will save you a lot of time in the long run. The next one is, it's really important to provide clear, consistent information to all of the rights holders that you're dealing with. That's important so that you can achieve success in your project. It's important so your reputation remains intact. Spreadsheets are your friends. I'm not joking. They really, really are. Use the exceptions. They're there to be used. I cannot emphasize that enough. Don't just go, let's be super conservative. Don't be reckless, but creative use of copyright exceptions can really advance the aims of your project. If you're not sure, ask, but seriously, use them. I cannot emphasize enough. I get really frustrated by people going, It's like, no, they're there, use them, right? And also, projects evolve. So you may have an idea of where things are going to be at the beginning. That will probably change. Keep on talking to one another. Talk to your colleagues. I talk to the archive curators, to photography, to a whole bunch of people all the time in the work that I do, saying where you're at, what are the issues. And that's a really important part of what I do. So projects evolve, talk to people, come to things like this. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Cheers.